your opinion of the Apple FBI standoff.
Hmm.
And I know it sort of comes as a cliche, but one of the questions I have is, well, first of all, let me say, I guess what I want to know is I want your opinion as to the standoff itself. Is this a slippery slope that we're going down?
I think it's a slippery slope in a bunch of different ways. So to begin, the FBI has asserted that this is about one iPhone, but in fact, there are 12 other phones that they're also requesting already. So what Apple is being asked to do is write forensic software, which they do not have a business interest in doing. They make no profit off of it. It's outside of the scope of what they do. And this forensic software would be developed and then used by law enforcement in conjunction with Apple to subsequently undermine the security protections that Apple has spent millions and millions and millions of dollars putting in place. Those security protections aren't just to protect bad people, but everyone else. So one of the challenges with this discussion right now, and I think it's actually not entirely accurate, is this is being framed as a privacy versus a security question, and that's true to some extent. But more broadly, it's a security versus security question. Should the state have the ability to remove any and all security protections that companies put in place? So that's one side of it. Within the context of American law, this is also a First Amendment issue. So it isn't, just forthright rights around search, but it's also is Apple or are companies generally in a situation where they can be compelled to engage in speech. So in the United States, code is speech. The U.S. government is typically prohibited from forcing people to say anything. And so this really amounts to the FBI forcing Apple to say something that, in doing so, violates the company's Fourth Amendment rights as a corporate citizen.
Oh, so that was interesting. Thank you. So I guess if you could explain, because what I've been reading is that we're basically in a time of enormous conflict now, and my understanding that is that the technology is reshaping our lives. Can you explain that yourself?
Sure. I mean, we see more and more of our lives shift to digital environments. And as they're shifting to digital environments, companies that are providing services are increasingly mindful of the fact that, what we're saying to one another should be secured in some fashion or another. What's unique about a very small variety of companies, and Apple is one of them, is they actually don't make money off of the personal information that we provide to them. So Apple makes money by, they store a little bit of our data, but really they're a hardware company. They're not an advertising company. And so we're in this interesting situation where companies like Microsoft, which have long-standing agreements with government to undermine the security that they provide to their customers, companies like Google that store data in plain text because of their business model, those are companies that, regardless of the security they put in place, government agencies have the ability to access. But we're starting to see a rise of companies that, when they make money, either by selling a service once and not through advertising, or selling a product once and not through advertising, it's reconfiguring some of the dimensions of how law enforcement believes it can gain access to data. Significantly, however, there is more data available to law enforcement, to intelligence agencies, to public bodies writ large now than ever before. The other thing that we've seen at the Citizen Lab in particular is, despite the availability of encryption, it's often poorly implemented, it's often easy to strip, and quite often the assertion that something is highly secured doesn't hold up under actual sustained examination. So in many respects, the Apple case is a true anomaly, where you do have a strong security system, you have a company that isn't making money off of personal data the same way as many of its competitors, but it's an anomaly. And so I think that there's a risk of looking at Apple as what the world is, and that's just not the case.
So can you tell me, in your opinion, what do you think should happen?
I think that this is a case where Obviously, it'll go to the Court of Appeals. The fact that the All Writs Act is being used, which is a very old piece of legislation, is problematic. So if you look at interception laws in the United States, especially those that are based around CALEA, there are strong limitations on what the government can compel telecommunications providers to do. There's back and forth arguments as to whether or not Apple fits that definition at the moment or not. But I think that compelling companies to develop forensic software to make it available to law enforcement is very dangerous. So it's not necessarily that the FBI or agents in the United States are bad guys. So I don't want to pretend or make that assertion. But as soon as this is available, other jurisdictions are going to follow. So not only will we create a very problematic legal precedent in the United States, but from a policy perspective, what is then to prevent other countries who have either very different rule of law or simply lack substantive rule of law? What are we going to do when they come to Apple and they say, okay, if you want to sell on our market, you also have to provide us information? So maybe in some cases that'll mean that these other countries are tracking criminals or serious terrorist attacks or something, which maybe we all agree with. But maybe it'll also be people who practice Christianity, or it'll be people who practice Judaism, or it'll be people who simply have beliefs or opinions or positions that are out of favor with the state. So right now these tools don't exist, and so companies are able to push back reasonably effectively. But as soon as the United States and other Western countries say, oh no, this is okay, this is acceptable, this should be expected, then the moral weight of those companies is diminished. The moral weight of the countries that they operate in is diminished. And the actual tools to do the analysis and forensic work exist. And so it's a very risky proposition that the FBI is tracking down, which I would note stands in strong contravention to other parts of the U.S. government. So the CIA and the National Security Agency both have said that they support strong encryption. The FBI and the Department of Justice seems to be pretty offside of many other aspects of the American government at the moment.
And I think some of the polls in the U.S. are saying like people are sort of half and half, understanding the security, but morally, I think they want to have this information come out.
Of course. I mean, the FBI is making a very persuasive, emotional argument, and fortunately that's why law will hopefully win versus emotions. I mean, everyone wants to be safe. The United States in particular, there are high concerns about terrorism, regardless of the actual incidence of terrorist attacks. And there's academic studies that explain sort of why that is more likely to be the case. But this isn't a case where the FBI, the NSA, CIA, or it's important to say, any element of the American government actually can say with some strength that there is something of interest on this device. There might be, it's possible, but there's no evidence of it. So the NSA, which, not a small organization, has come to the conclusion that there doesn't seem to be substantive links between the San Bernardino attacks and international terrorism groups. There's very limited evidence to tie them to ISIS or any other group for that matter. We just have no evidence that this has some sort of smoking gun or something of that nature. So really what we're doing is we're saying that there's a small, slim, maybe possibility that there's something there, and as a result, we could create legal precedent and seriously shift international policy. That seems risky, if not simply irresponsible. The other piece that's important to note in this, of course, is that Apple has been fully compliant in assisting the FBI at all steps. They have worked with forensics with the FBI. They have provided engineers. They have offered solutions. The reason that the FBI is in the situation it is now is because of back and forth between the FBI and the county that employed one of the attackers. They modified the password that was attached to the phone and the iCloud account. That's the reason why the FBI cannot gain access to the iCloud backups. It's not that Apple has done anything, it's that the government made a mistake. And now they're using very old law to try and compel Apple to do something that seemingly would run afoul of First Amendment rights.
Wow. Thank you, Chris. I think I've learned a lot here.
Well, it's my pleasure.
I think it's great. Is there anything else you want to add to it, or?
No, those are probably all the
I
main
think
points.
that was really, really interesting.